name is Joseph Patterson. Welcome to One Jamaica TV. This is the place of choice for all who love this country and want to see the nation succeed.
Welcome back to the Morning Watch. I'm your host, Stokely Marshall. We move right into the second watch. Now, after ridding his country, El Salvador, of violent gangs, one world leader is crediting God with his administration's success. One news headline proclaimed El Salvador's praying president credits God for successes. And the unofficial formula President Nayib Bukele said was prayer. He recalled that he would pray daily for wisdom, victory, and the protection of his people. It's a miracle, Bukele said. Is a truly godly government the answer for any country? And is godly government attainable? We have as guests this morning to discuss this pretty interesting topic, Pastor Christopher Kennedy, Pastor Joyland and Abrams Mennonite Church, St. Elizabeth, and President of the United Independence Congress, Jamaica's third political party, Joseph Patterson. Mr. Patterson, Pastor Kennedy, good morning.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning, Mr. Patterson. That sounds like you, sir.
Morning, Stokely.
Pastor Kennedy, yes, you're both on now. First of all, I will start with the pastor, and then we will solicit the views of Mr. Patterson. Now, Pastor Kennedy, is a truly godly government possible? And is it the answer to a country and its issues?
Well, we have to approach that quite carefully because are you talking about a democracy? If it is a democracy, the godly in the sense of having a worldview, a general worldview that involves God and so on, that's fine. I would assent to that it can be. But other questions arise. Are we talking about this being running a government like a church? If that is the case, I would say then that brings in a number of problems. And we have seen in history where...
Pastor Kennedy, can I ask you to pause one moment? When you say running the government like a church, it's almost as if running a church is a sort of pejorative issue. What is wrong with running a church?
No, it's not a pejorative issue. It's just that it's two different spheres, spheres. And in terms of a government, you're really dealing with a different set of people, all right?
Yes.
For example, one of the problems that can arise if you run it like a church and only say Christians are eligible and born again Christians are eligible, so you're going to have less talent too. People
eligible for what, sir?
Yeah, that kind of
you
thing.
Mean to be eligible to be pastors, deacons, and so on?
Right, that kind of thing. You and that's not what running a nation is different from running a church. It's two different things completely. And if it's a democracy, especially the democracy, you have to cater to the needs of people who vote you into power, taxpayers and so on. I mean, those things might not be the kind of things that a church can tolerate. The standards in terms of Christian expectations, what Jesus Christ requires of our lives and so on are wholly different. But on a national basis, you have to take into consideration the needs and the interests of others who might not be godly either. Might not be godly interests, but they are democratic concerns, they are taxpayers, they are stakeholders in all of this, and we have to approach it far differently than in a church setting.
Okay, so you're saying godly, yes, but not run it like a church, and you explain what that meant.
Yes.
President of the UIC, Joseph Patterson, your thoughts, sir. Good morning again.
Sure. Good morning again, gentlemen. I must agree wholeheartedly with Pastor Kennedy. A person can choose
so if I can have to pause one moment, Mr. Patterson, you have an issue with running a church?
Absolutely not. I'm just saying that it's good. It's good that the pastor understands the difference between running a church and running a government. Yes. A church is catering to one specific special interest group. And of course, there are many churches.
So you have reduced the church to a special interest group, Mr.
Absolutely not. What I'm saying is what it is. The church is a special interest group. You have different ones,
Mr. Patterson, it's a special interest group.
Absolutely. A church is catering to the needs of its parishioners, those who want to identify with it. So you have, and remember, you have different churches, you have different religious groups. Now, a government has to cater to all of these groups. A government has to ensure that it doesn't play favorites. So you cannot have a government that now becomes a Christian government or a Muslim government or a Hindu government or whatever.
It has to be you have Muslim governments. But anyway, hold that thought one second, Mr. Patterson. Only because of time, because we are on a break. Hold the thought, Mr. Patterson. We'll return to it after the break. Listeners, please stay with us. We'll be right back on the Morning Watch. Welcome back to the Morning Watch. I'm your host, Stokely Marshall. We are in the second watch having a very interesting and already appearing to be a riveting conversation with two gentlemen, Pastor Christopher Kennedy and President of the UIC, Joseph Patterson. And the topic is, can a nation's governing body be wholly godly? And just before we return to that, I just wanted to point to something I note here online. Countries that are Islamic governments include Iran, some people say Iran, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, Afghanistan, Mauritania, I hope I pronounced that correctly, and Yemen. Continue, President of the UIC, Joseph Patterson. You're making a very interesting point. Please continue, sir.
Sure. Once you're going to have a nation of free people, the pastor called it a democracy. I prefer to want a republic where you protect the sovereignty of each individual, which means the freedom to worship as you choose, for example. So the government would not want to be so constructed as to in any way infringe upon the rights of anyone to worship as they please. And if you therefore try to have a government that is supposedly godly, you then have to define what is godly and godly to whom and which God. What are the rules and basis for that God and that religion? And so it's best for us to move away from trying to have a godly government and instead try to have good governance. And what do I mean by good governance? I mean you have the rule of law that treats all citizens equally and ensure that there is justice and equity for all. And then you allow people to be as godly or as ungodly as they choose, provided they do not infringe on the life, liberty, or property rights of others.
So persons, to try to follow up on what you just said, Mr. Patterson, allow persons to be as godly or as ungodly as they choose.
Yeah, provided they do not use force or fraud to infringe on the life, liberty, or property rights of others. What I mean by that, you're respecting my sovereignty and you're respecting everybody else's sovereignty, but nobody uses their sovereignty to infringe on the life, the liberty, or the property rights of anyone else.
Well, one can make the argument that some person's ungodly behavior inherently will infringe upon the rights of others, because you see, for instance, what's happening in parts of the US where certain persons who describe themselves as transgender, they want to take part in women's sports. Biological male wanting to take part in women's sports, getting medals and getting scholarships over natural born women. And it has created quite a stir. Your thoughts on that, Mr. Patterson, or you?
And that is fraudulent, because you cannot change your gender. Your gender is assigned to you at birth by something greater than all of us. And so if you're a male, by birth, you're a male. And if you're a female, you're a female. Now, trying to use fraudulent means to corrupt the minds and thoughts of people, and by extension, the government, to give credence to somebody just identifying as whatever they want and then infringing on another person's right, is unacceptable. Now, that is where you have good laws and good government, but not necessarily godly. Because again, to be godly, you have to define it in the context of a particular religion or a particular sect of a particular religion. We don't want a Methodist government or a Presbyterian government or a Sabbath-keeping government or a Muslim or Hindu. What we want is government of the people, by the people, for the people. And that means respecting the rights of all the people.
Mr. Pastor Kennedy, thank you, Mr. Patterson. Pastor Kennedy,
yes.
You have heard Mr. Patterson. Is a godly, well, you are in favor of a democracy, but if I'm trying to paraphrase, and you can intervene if you think I'm going off track. To try to paraphrase, sir, from what you had said earlier, democracy fine, so long as it is infused with godly principles, but not a godly government per se, not run it like a church. So is what you want, even what you're asking for or advocating for, is even that attainable? Because sometimes you have a government and you have laws in place that are godly or appear to be godly, and there is pushback to say, well, we need to change that law to, they don't say less godly, but in effect, that's what it might amount to. Your thoughts, Mr. Kennedy?
You know, I would come in here with a moral argument.
Yes.
I would come in here with a moral argument. If there's no God,
Yes.
then it's all a matter of everybody, the fit of the fittest, surviving. Because somebody can,
Survival of the fittest. Yes.
yeah, because somebody can say, for example, that for my survival, I need to go into women's sports because I identify as a female.
Yes.
You know, and so if God is out of the picture, you really can't have any morality. You know, so yes, we have to be careful of that. And in that sense, I would say when you talk about a godly nation, our godly government, that's a very, very important point. Because as I said, without that idea of the moral argument, everything just floats around and spare chaos, and the fittest of the fittest survives. But when I talk about a democracy, though, I think that we have to be practical. If 99% of the people say that they don't want a particular government, then 99% of the people should be able to say that. You know, 1% of the people, it's not practical. It doesn't work for 1% of the people now to say, I want that government to be in place. And because I am from the oligarch or I'm from, certain background and we're rich and so on, we can have our own way and deny the rights of the others. So I want to be very careful. While I appreciate what Mr. Patterson is saying, I think some people might want to read certain things into what he's saying. And that's why I'm taking that kind of angle.
So is it really, well, to go back to the question, is it attainable in terms of having a government that's a democracy, but all of its laws, its principles, its policies are godly, but it's not a godly government in the sense of being a theocracy? I've slightly changed the question.
Right. You cannot use the word godly because you have to then define what it means. And you can
we can return to that in a moment. But just as a concept or principle.
Right. But as a concept or principle, yes. I think the best approach is to focus on protecting the rights of the individual as opposed to trying to impose on society whatever definition you're going to try to find of godly. Because the moment you do that, you're now going to undermine the rights of some citizens, meaning there might be citizens who will never want to identify with what you consider godly. And that's the difference between a government and a church. When a person joins a church, they're of their own volition saying, I want to be a part of this group. For example, you might have two churches in the community. One believe in the Trinity and one doesn't. And some decide to join the Trinity and some decide, and that's fine. You want to preserve a society where that kind of freedom exists for people to choose what they want to do. The role of government now is to protect your right to choose. Now, where you get a problem is where you are not happy with the choice the person makes. So, for example, a person may choose, for example, a lifestyle that some of us don't like, maybe even a majority of us don't like. We don't like that lifestyle. Now, as long as the government is not using taxpayers' money to force that lifestyle on us, that's person's choice. The moment now we try to use government to push anything, let's say we're going to use the government to push a particular religion today, but then another group take over the government and decide to push a lifestyle you don't like. That's their version of religion, and they're going to push that. You have a problem. So the best thing to do is to prevent any special interest group, be it the church or otherwise, from being able to co-opt our government and use it to advance their agenda. Let every agenda be advanced in the marketplace. For example, if I like cherry ice cream and I think everybody should like it, allow me to go in the marketplace and try to get everybody to buy cherry ice cream. We don't use the government now as a vehicle to say everybody should like or should have cherry ice cream. That's the difference between even a democracy and a republic. And I prefer a republic because a republic protects your sovereignty. A democracy is mob rule. If the majority say it, it goes. Suppose the majority is aligned against your religion. You have a problem. What you want is a government that protects you and your religion, not a government that today gives you power, but tomorrow you may be on the opposite end of the stick.
Pastor Kennedy, do you agree that the church is a special interest group? Or you have no thoughts on that?
If you're talking about the kingdom of God, yes. If you're talking about kingdom of God and ideas of that.
In terms of what Mr. Patterson just said, the church is a special interest group. It is, I don't want to say relegated. It's just one of many groups seeking or jockeying for its space in society. That's how you see the church?
No, I don't think that's what he was saying. That's not what I get from what he was saying either.
Correct. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is a society is made up of many groups. For example, one of the groups in the Jamaican society, which is getting alarmingly bigger, are those that are pushing the same-sex agenda, for example, right? That's a group. That's a special
interest group.
Yes.
Okay, so stick up here, Mr. Patterson, only because of time. So, Pastor Kennedy, is the church a special interest group similar to as the LGBT group is a special interest group?
No. I think the church is a bit of a wider sense of interest. And the idea that the church...
You have answered that question. In terms of godly for you would be the Christian God, I'm assuming.
Yes, and I would say I was talking about a worldview, a Christian worldview, and not necessarily a church worldview, so to speak.
And what about your do you have any comments I should ask you about in the Muslim world, if I could use that terminology, where you have some countries which are Islamic countries, Iran being one of them, Yemen being another. Any comment on that quickly before
the problem is that these Islamic countries, their idea of a moral argument is flawed. I don't think they can hold to the moral argument very, very well. And so that system of God is automatically flawed.
Very interesting. We're almost out of time already. Final thoughts, gentlemen, starting with you, Pastor, and then ending with you, Mr. Patterson. Pastor, any final thought in a few seconds?
Yeah, I don't want to make a distinction when we talk about the Christian, because Christianity I still view, but it's still a discussion, and we do respect, is a historical religion, right?
Interesting.
Facts of Jesus' birth, death, and resurrection can be verified historically. Whatever anybody wants to say, I am prepared to defend that, and I wouldn't classify that as just any other religion or any other interest group. It is true.
Okay, and Mr. Patterson, in 2 seconds, 3 seconds, as 10 seconds. Any final word you can with us?
In my final word, we must have a government that protects the interest of every individual to their freedom of religion and their rights. And therefore, we should not have a government that is overtly subscribing to any particular religion or faith.
But you don't have a challenge with godly principles being used. I know you have an issue with the word.
But no, what I can say is principles are principles. So, for example, the principle of thou shalt not murder. That's a beautiful principle.
Understood. Have to leave it on this morning, Mr. Patterson and Pastor Kennedy. I want to thank you both for your time and for your thoughts. Wish we had more time, but alas, never enough time on the Morning Watch. Thank you, listeners, for being with us. Join us again tomorrow as we look at other topical and controversial issues, and visit the Love 101 FM YouTube channel and Facebook page for this and all other Love 101 FM programs, and of course on TikTok as well at Love 101 FM Jamaica. Listen to the Morning Watch by downloading our Love 101 app and stay connected to us, the #1 gospel station in Jamaica, Love 101 FM. Thanks to our producer Kathy Gale and to our guests. I am Stokely Marshall, handing back to Love in the Morning with Chicago.
One Jamaica TV.